the overall picture that was emerging was a picture of what I call mixed character, where we have some good sides to our character. In some situations, we will rise to the challenge and say, help a stranger in need. But in other situations, this is the mixed part of it, the unfortunate part of it, we will let self-interest get in the way of doing what we morally should do, the right thing.
Today, a remarkable thing is going to happen. You are going to change. For better or for worse, on purpose or by accident, by yourself or with some help. By the time you go to bed tonight, you will be one day's worth of different from the way you started out in the morning. Change starts today. And today, I'm particularly delighted because we get to talk to somebody who is a unique expert in the field of change and particularly character change. His name is Christian Miller, and he teaches philosophy at Wake Forest University. Christian, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you.
It's wonderful to be with you. I really look forward to our conversation together.
Well, just for everybody listening, a little background. If you don't know Christian, he is the head of what's called the Character Project. A really interesting idea. It's funded by Templeton. And he has written a book called The Character Gap, How Are We? That's where I want to start in just a minute. He is also very conversant, not just with philosophy, but experimental psychology and what that has to teach us, particularly about character. So he sits kind of astride a number of different disciplines. Here's where I want to start, Christian. I want to read a quote from you and then ask you to comment on it some. The subtitle of The Character Gap is How Good Are We? And you have a really provocative answer to that question. Here's what you write. Most of us, I suspect, tend to think of ourselves, our friends, and families as good people. We may not be saints, but we're not morally corrupt either. We're honest, kind, trustworthy, reasonably virtuous people. One of the central themes of this book is that such a picture of our character is badly mistaken. Indeed, the results of hundreds of studies in psychology call into question this way of thinking about ourselves. And then you note an event that happened in Target one time where a man named Vance collapsed of a heart attack and people just walked right past him. People in some cases stepped over his body. He died that night. And we'll look at something like that and think, man, what's the matter with those people? I would never do that. But in fact, most of us do. So you write, like those shoppers, we have serious character flaws that prevent us from being good people. In fact, we don't even recognize that many of these flaws exist. Does that mean that instead we're simply wretched people, cruel or hateful? Well, I want to suggest in this book that most of us are not morally wretched either. What's going on here? Most of us are not good people, but we are also not bad either? Exactly. So take it from there. Comment on how have you discovered that? And particularly for everybody listening, how do we get to know the truth about ourselves and our characters?
Well, thank you so much. There's so much to unpack there. Let's start with philosophy, then maybe a little bit of psychology too. So on the philosophy side, I'm using a framework of character here, where character comes in two forms, good character and bad character. Good character is virtuous character, the virtues like honesty, compassion, and courage. On the flip side, we have bad character, the vices, things like cowardice, dishonesty, and callousness. And so I was thinking to myself, well, what am I like? Where do I fall on the spectrum of character? And where do most people fall on the spectrum of character? And there are different ways of answering that. You can answer it using theology. You can answer it using history. You can answer it using current events. But I went to this experimental literature in psychology because I thought, here are researchers putting people in carefully controlled situations where they have an opportunity to lie or steal or cheat or help or harm. And then we get to see what people do. Not just one person, but often in these studies, hundreds of people run through a given study. And to cut to the chase, without getting into the weeds of the studies, yet at least, then it seemed to me that the overall picture that was emerging was a picture of what I call mixed character, where we have some good sides to our character. In some situations, we will rise to the challenge and say, help a stranger in need. But in other situations, this is the mixed part of it, the unfortunate part of it, we will let self-interest get in the way of doing what we morally should do, the right thing. We'll let that person, for example, in the target, lie on the floor in pain so that we can get that TV before anyone else does. And so the overall picture is one of being mixed. And then the question is, well, how can individually I learn more about myself and get a better understanding of where my character is? So first, I really want to clarify, everyone's not the same. Each person's different. There are people on closer to the spectrum of virtue. There are people closer on the spectrum of vice. We have our moral our moral heroes. We have our moral villains. We can all put names attaching to each. So I'm not saying we're all the same, but many of us, it looks like, are a mixed bag. And to unlock my own character better, I think there are a couple tools we can use. One is just reflecting back over my life, thinking about the opportunities I had to do the right thing, and did I do them or not, and what influenced me, what prevented me from doing them if I didn't. We also have people in our lives who we can talk to, who can serve as kind of points of contact, who can give us insight into ourselves that we might need and not see ourselves. They might understand us in ways that are better than we understand ourselves. And then there are also more objective measures, things like this empirical research we've alluded to. But since this is also in a Christian context, there are objective measures about what does the Bible say, and what does the Christian tradition say, and what does my pastor say, and what do people I confess to about really important things say about my life. So I think there are a number of touch points we can use to try and get a better understanding of our character.
And you actually point out in the book that it turns out that these studies empirically seem to point to a description of the human condition that is pretty consistent with the statements that get made in Scripture. And those ideas that all we like sheep have gone astray. When you look at the data from why is it that so often we don't help because we're afraid that we might be embarrassed if help wasn't really needed. It doesn't take much for us, it seems, to do the wrong thing or to fail to do the right thing.
That's right. So 2 points here. One, does this fit with Scripture overall? I think the answer is clearly yes. If you didn't look at the empirical literature and you just kind of predicted what human beings would like from looking at the Bible, I think your prediction would have been, in turn, quite consistent with what the research is telling us.
That's amazing.
So now, why do I say that? Let me unpack that a little bit more. I think on the one hand, theologically speaking, if I could shift into that vein for a moment, there's the doctrine of original sin and the idea that all human beings, with a few exceptions, are corrupt in their character to some extent. So that's a kind of pessimistic view about human beings. And it can be taken to an extreme level. It could be, taken to the extreme point where no one can ever have a good character, no one can ever do the right thing. I'm not willing to go that far because I think we should balance that, on the other hand, with the idea that we're creating the image of God.
Yes.
Even with original sin doesn't wipe away the imago Dei, that we still have moral capacities to discern right from wrong and to perform good actions. So they have to sit side by side with each other, imago Dei with original sin. And when you put them together, what do you get? Well, it's overly simplistic perhaps, but I think you get a mixture, a mixed bag. We're a mixture of good and bad. And that's the picture that's coming out of the empirical literature. So I'm quite encouraged by that. And then you're right. The unfortunate thing about this is that it is quite easy to trigger some bad behavior. So it is, if you put people in situations where they're ordered to do things by authority figures, and those things are horrendous, people will often go along with what the authority figure says. If you're in situations where someone is in need of help, as you've already said with the Target example, and others around are not doing anything, this is the bystander effect or the group effect. We often will give in to our fear of embarrassment and not step up to the plate ourselves. So yes, we are a mixed bag. We have both of these things going on inside of us, imago Dei and original sin, But we have to keep in mind that it's pretty easy to move us in one direction or the other. And unfortunately, in these studies, we see again and again participants can be moved to do things as terrible as letting a person wallow in pain, or even voluntarily kill an innocent person. And that's pretty scary.
So for everybody that's listening to us right now, as you think about this day and that change starts today, how do you pursue that? We'll leave you with one other thought. Christian, in your book, you also, as you're writing about people that you want to acknowledge and thank, at the end of that, you write about your 3 children. And you say, having 3 children under the age of 5 has been an incredible experience, not to mention a real test of our characters. It has helped to confirm that what I say in this book about the character gap is true first and foremost about me. And we also at one time had 3 children under the age of 5. And it doesn't necessarily get easier when they get over the age of 5. But for everybody listening now, today, just be curious. And if you have parents or if you have kids, as you have friends, as you have work, when you're shopping in Target, whatever you're doing, just ask God, would you show me as much of the truth about my character as I'm able to see? And help me be non-defensive and open and humble and confident in your help as I look at that gap between my character as it is and that character that you want me to become. And then trust that God's at work in that. Change starts today. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Tim. Thanks for joining us here at BecomeNew.com. We hope that these resources help you to grow spiritually one day at a time. If you'd like to receive the emails that go along with each video, you can let us know at BecomeNew.com/subscribe. And if you need prayer, we would love to pray for you. You can text us at 855-888-0444. We'll see you next time.